שבורו אליקאי ניצורם בדהס בבינו עם הסקאי ויחד בירו נו סנבוהם ויש משלים בקרב תאי ביי איי 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 אלאו באים זילים פיקן נויגה נו אזיגי בו בכל הואי לו סמאכים בצייסם וסמסם בויו אוי סם ביי מורצוין כהינם Hey, I be cool boy. No, it's nimlich moi zu am werden du. Mit deinem Malchisoy, Guru la Shemesh, Shai Yizrachoy. Du be his kind tira sabunu. Shei bach shei bach no, it's lo oi kol tzevu muhuraim. Gigi feire si gidilu, Tzrufim bechayos ve'yofanay hakodesh.
Shalom, my dear friends, Shalom and Shavua Tov. Today, the 11th day of the month of Iyar, of the year 5777, corresponding to the 7th of May of the year 2017. Beginning of a very special week in the Torah calendar. This week we have on Wednesday, the 10th of May, Pesach Sheni, the 14th day of the month of Iyar, just 1 month after the main Passover offering on the 14th of Nisan. And for those who were either ritually impure at the time of the Passover sacrifice or were at a distance too great to get to the Temple Mount to sacrifice on that day, they had a second chance on the 14th of Iyar, as we found taught in the Torah in the portion of Ba'alotecha, the third portion of Book of Numbers. So this is on Wednesday, a festival day, a day to remember the concept of Pesach as we come ever nearer to Lag BaOmer today, a week which is the great celebration of the two-third point through the Omer count. Today we have just gone over the hump. We are already past the middle day, which was yesterday on Shabbat, the 25th day of the Omer count. Today, the 26th day, we are over the hump and already looking towards the end, towards Mount Sinai, towards the festival of Shavuot. And a great milestone on this journey is next Sunday, Lag BaOmer, the turning point of the Omer from mourning into a time of increasing anticipation and steady preparation for the Shavuot festival. We do have days of note and commemoration in all of the coming weeks, days of great celebration. We have after Lag BaOmer, we have just the week after that, we have Yom Yerushalayim, the day celebrating the liberation of Jerusalem at the time of the Six-Day War in 1967, which is just now 50 years ago, and some of us are old enough to remember very vividly that very dramatic time in the history of world Jewry and the state of Israel, and the sudden remarkable transformation of this little country into a great expanse covering many of the areas promised to us in the Torah. So we are very connected at this time to the land and to the Torah and to the preparation for Matan Torah, for the giving of the Torah on Chag HaShavuot. Well, this coming Wednesday I will not be available to teach for personal reasons, so this week our call is today, tomorrow, Monday, and on Thursday with the help of God, and both in the book of Job and in Tractate Shabbat, which are very sizable projects. We are just over the hump also. We are now into the second half of the book of Job and advancing into the second half of the Tractate of Shabbat. And with God's help, we will complete our whole study. And so today, let us now come to our studies in Iyov, book of Job, chapter 28. Shalom. Shalom. Today, the 11th day of the month of Iyar of the year 5777, corresponding to the 7th of May of the year 2017. And in our continuing studies in the book of Job, Sefer Iyov, we now come to one of the most beautiful and sublime passages in the whole work in chapter 8, which comes as part of Job's closing addresses before he has said all that he has to say. And we have several chapters of this very sublime and most eloquent Hebrew text with us in the coming days, and particularly noteworthy among these chapters is this present chapter, which comes in the context of Job's overall discourse, which is broken up into sections, both in the printed Bibles, but also in the Hebrew text. It's into separate parashiyot according to their theme. In the portion that we studied in the previous chapter, chapter 27, Job already had said that he could not understand the judgments of God because there's no explanation why a tzaddik like himself should suffer in this way. And he cannot accept the accusations of his companions that there had to be some flaw in him. And as we shall see in the unfolding chapters, we will see now Job, his most noble soul, speaking out his path of righteousness, as we shall encounter in the coming chapters. But to summarize chapter 27 as an introduction to our present chapter 28, Job had explained that it was not that he had any affiliation to the wicked or any partiality towards them that made him complain about this injustice. His complaint about the injustice was about the inscrutable, unfathomable problem of why the righteous suffer in this world while the wicked are apparently successful and suffer relatively less. And in chapter 27, he had from verse 13 onwards to the end of the chapter set forth indeed the temporariness of any earthly success that the wicked might enjoy. Job had again and again depicted different ways in which the present apparent temporal success of the wicked will come to an end, and everything he built. His house was like the house of a worm and like a temporary hut. And so Job had, in the closing words of chapter 27, fully expressed his conviction that there's no point in being wicked, because wickedness, if it has any success, it doesn't endure. And it's not that the Job is advocating in what he is saying. On the contrary, as we now find in chapter 28, he's going to say that even though the righteous may suffer in this world, their path is and will always remain the pursuit of the knowledge of God and closeness to God. And indeed, he will be concluding this section in a way that is really an echo or a precursor of the book of Proverbs, Mishle, and likewise the book of Kohelet, where King Solomon concludes that the foundation of all of our service in this world is to fear God. And for Job, fear of God is the gateway to the wisdom of God. And in our chapter, he's going to explain why the pursuit of wisdom, the knowledge of God. For in this sense, wisdom means only the knowledge of God, the knowledge of God's light, of his teaching of the Torah, why this is superior to everything else because of the rewards that it brings in the world of truth, the world of the souls. So having in chapter 27 spoken about the temporariness of the success of the wicked, he now extrapolates to that and is going to speak about the temporariness of even the most apparently enduring things like the metals in the earth and like the darkness of creation, and he's going to evoke the destruction of whole civilizations as examples of the temporariness of this world. And then starting from verse 12 on in our chapter, he's going to extol the preciousness of chokhmah, of wisdom, to which no earthly possessions or success can possibly compare. And it is this section particularly which is just sublime in its eloquence and beauty. And in order to study this chapter, we shall have to have the pleasure of going through it several times in the text to see it both in its apparent pshat, simple meaning level, and then to delve deeper both into the more allegorical comments of Rashi and the Targum. And we shall end up, with the help of God, coming to the commentary of Nachmanides, Ramban, in the latter part of chapter 28, where Ramban explains the esoteric allusions in the passage extolling the greatness of Chokhmah. So let's now turn to the Hebrew text of Job chapter 28. Ki yesh לכסף מוצאו, ומוקוים לזהוב יוזוקו. Ki yesh lakesef, for there is for silver motzo, a source. Umokoim lazohov yozoku. There is a place for gold where they smelt it out of the rocks. The first two of the four metals here, silver and gold, they have a place from where they can be extracted, and that is a place that is finite. Eventually the silver and the gold will come to an end, and so all of the other things that Job will enumerate. And in contrast, when he comes to the praise of wisdom, he will show us that wisdom has no end whatever. It has no source because it comes from God's own self, the source of all. It is spiritual, it is not material. So going ahead now in chapter 28, silver has its source. Gold, there's a place where it is extracted. Barzel me'afel yukoch, ve'even yotzuk nechusho. Barzel, iron, me'afel yukoch. It can be taken out of the afar, out of the earth. Ve'even yotzuk nechusho. A stone shall pour forth copper. So here first the four metals, and now continuing with other aspects of the creation that have a limit. Kates som lachoshech, ולכל תכליס הוא חוקר, אבן, אופל וצלמובס. Kates som lachoshech. An end has he placed to darkness. Ulechol tachlis, to every end, the limit, the boundary of everything. Hu choker, he investigates and fathoms it. He knows the end of everything. Hu, the Hebrew word hu, which we translate as he, referring to God, alludes to God's keter, the ultimate will of God, in which all of the ends of all of the components of creation already have their set measure in the crown of his attributes, his will to bring forth creation. He has set a limit to all of these earthly things. Even, Ophel, V'tzalmoves, a stone of darkness and the shadow of death. That is to say, Kate som lachoshech, he has put an end to darkness. There is an end to the darkness of night when the morning dawns, or an end to the darkness of exile when redemption comes. Ulechol tachlis hu choker, to every end, to every limit of everything God is investigating. Even here, the word stone, even refers to the ultimate material center of the universe, and to the levels within it of darkness, Ophel, and of Tzalmoves, the shadow of death. God has set an end to Gehenna also, set a limit to them. Well, now verse 4, continuing to speak about the transience of things. On one level is speaking about a river that disappears, leaving the people in that place desolate without any water supply. On another level, which we'll investigate further on our second way through this chapter, this is alluding to the overthrow of Sodom. And the overthrow of Sodom was a catastrophe for the entire civilization, a moral warning of enormous magnitude, something like the magnitude of the overthrow of Pompeii in ancient Roman times through the destructiveness of a volcanic eruption. And our section indeed is reminiscent of a massive volcanic eruption that wipes out a whole fertile, wealthy, developed civilization into complete disappearance. It's another example of the limits of material wealth and power as contrasted to wisdom, which will be depicted later on, having no limits whatever. Poratz nachal me'im gur hanishkochim mini rogel dolu me'enosh no'u. Poratz nachal me'im gur. According to the simple explanation given to us by the Metzudat David, Paratz Nachal, there burst forth a river, Me'im Gur, from being with the place where previously Gur, from the expression of Nigar, water being flowing down, being drawn down, Maim Nigrorim. So the river has suddenly changed its course. Poratz Nachal, it burst through its previous banks, Me'im Gur, from being in the place where previously it had flowed. Hanishkochim, they have been forgotten. Mini Rogel. Hanishkochim mini Rogel, according to the interpretation of Metzudat David, is that these pathways where the river formerly flowed and people would go there to draw waters, Hanishkochim, they're now forgotten mini regel, from the foot that no longer treads there. There's no longer any waters to be drawn there. That river has come to its end. Dalu me'enosh no'u. Dalu, they were lifted up, these waters of the river. Me'enosh no'u, they fled away from man. And now the text continues to evoke the overthrow of a whole civilization. And here we continue with, on the allegorical level, the evocation of the destruction of Sodom. Verse 5, Eretz mimeno yetze lochem, v'sachteho nepach kemo eish. Eretz, a land, mimeno yetze lochem, from her shall go forth bread. V'sachteho nepach kemo eish. Sachteho, underneath her, that is to say, her entire place, nepach was overturned, kemo eish, like fire. This is the overthrow of Sodom evoked here, this complete destruction of a civilization, another example of the end of things. Continuing now with this eloquent depiction of our beautiful, beautiful world. Verse 6, Makom sapir avoneho, ve'afros zohov lo. Makom sapir avoneho, there is a place where sapphire are her stones. Ve'afros zohov lo, the dust of gold to that place, the gold dust. It is from this verse that our sages learned the law that to perform the mitzvah of covering the blood of a slaughtered bird or wild animal, chaya, after the shechita has been performed, the slaughter, besides using a regular earth to cover over the blood in fulfillment of the mitzvah, it's also permitted to take gold dust for somebody who had that available to sprinkle over the blood. Out of this verse we learn from the verse that the afar with which the Torah says to cover could be afar where zahavlo, where it has the gold dust in it. So this is now speaking about this most wonderfully prosperous land that was an abundance of bread, a land that had the sapphire stones and the gold. Now what's it become? Verse 7, Nosiv lo yedo'o oyit velo shezofatu ein ayo. Well, this verse literally would mean nosiv, a pathway, lo yedo'o oyit, that they did not know this pathway, the oyit, this bird of prey, velo shezofatu ein ayo, nor did they ever look upon it the eye of the ayo bird. These birds are enumerated in the Torah in the list of the unclean birds, and also in the section of Abraham's covenant between the portions where it's the ayit, bird of prey, that comes down to, and he has to drive it away. So two possible interpretations here. One is that this is literally to be taken that after the devastation and the overthrow of this entire civilization, even these birds of prey had no place there, nor the eye of the ayo bird. The ayo bird is credited with exceptional powers of vision, as Rashi tells us about this ayo bird. It could be situated in one country, it could be in Babylon, and it could see the nevelot, the carrion meat that it would go to swoop down on in the land of Israel. So utterly desolate, according to the first interpretation, was this place that even these birds of prey would not go there. Another interpretation here is that prior to its overthrow, so prosperous and glorious was the land that there were no birds of prey in the form of marauding warriors passing through, and nor would the eye of the ayo bird, namely of spies who could tell at a distance what they were doing, would never get to see it. So one or the other, it's either depicting the glory of the previous civilization or its utter devastation afterwards. Lo hidrichuhu v'nei shochatz, lo odo olov shohal. Lo hidrichuhu v'nei shochatz. They did not tread upon it, the children of the shochatz. The shochatz, by some commentators, considered to be one of the species of lion. Lo odo olov shochal. They did not pass over it, the shachal species of lion. Different interpretation is that the v'nei shochatz are, the shochatz is an expression we shall encounter later on in the book of Job, referring to arrogance, that arrogant people could not tread upon this land, and the shachal could be also a serpent. So on one level, according to one interpretation, it's speaking about the utter devastation of the land after its destruction. According to the other, it's still evoking the greatness and glory of the country that was immune from attacks, until in verse 9, B'chalomish sholach yodo hofach mishoresh horim. B'chalomish, in the flint of the rock, sholach yodo, sent he forth his hand, the Almighty. Hofach mishoresh horim, he overturned from the very shoresh, from the root, the mountains. Batsurois yoirim bikeya v'chol yekor ro'aso aino. Batsurois, in the rocks, yoirim bikeya, he caused to burst through the rivers. V'chol yekor ro'aso einoi. All glory has his eye seen. He's seen to the end of everything. He's come to the boundaries. His wisdom encounters and fathoms the end of everything. He's seen all glory. Verse 10, Mebechi nahorois chibesh v'salumo yotzi or. The word mibchi can be interpreted in different ways. In one way, it could express the bursting forth of the rivers. But as we shall see, it also has the allusions of weeping. The Metzudat David, in his explanation of the words of the verse, the Metzudat Tziyun, explains Mivchi Nehoros as having to do with the the great depths of the rivers, the deep, deep sources of the rivers. And he would relate this word to Mavoch, a blind alley, a dead end, one of the great being lost in the wilderness, being as in the Moreh Nevuchim of Maimonides, the guide for the perplexed. So the Metzudat Tziyun is telling us that this word has an expression of the great depths of the rivers, chibesh, that God bound them up. He closed them up, as if to say once again that God can effect a complete change in creation, coming to the latter end of everything and stopping the flow of the rivers. Well, as we shall see when we come through this whole chapter a second time on the more esoteric and allegorical levels, this is referring to no less than the creation of the division of the upper waters and the lower waters on the second day of creation, when God made the firmament in the heavens, and when the lower waters were separated from the upper waters through this decree of God, it was with huge weeping, bechi, out of weeping, naharos, the rivers, chibesh, he closed them up, he set them in their place, he fixed them. V'salumo yotzi or. The word salumo has the connotation of something that is hidden, something that is concealed. And even that which is hidden away and concealed will eventually bring forth light. On another level, the talumo is said to be the window in the heavens through which the light shine down from the heavens into our lowly world. Well, we'll get back to that when we come through this a second time. But what we have seen so far in these verses is that everything temporal and material has an end, and Job is really setting forth his soul to us, explaining to us why, as he will expound in the chapters after this, why he was indeed truly innocent. We shall see in these chapters, as never before in this book, the tremendous beauty and nobility and virtuousness and righteousness of the soul of Job. And he is laying the foundations of this for us by explaining to us that there is nothing else to pursue in life except wisdom, and the road to wisdom is being through being in fear of God and turning aside from evil, as indeed Job is described at the very outset of the book. Sur Meira, he turns away from evil, and his whole pursuit was the pursuit of wisdom, and now he expounds the beauty and the glory of wisdom. And let's note on the first word of our text now. Let us note as we come into this section that the word wisdom in the Hebrew text, v'chokhmah, this is the explained by Rashi quite simply with perfect simplicity and clarity to be referring to the wisdom of the Torah. In other words, Job most certainly pursued the wisdom of the Torah as it was known to him. He was one of the true prophets, and he was one of those who searched out the truth, and he says, V'hachokhmah me'ayin timotzei ve'eze makom bino. As opposed to all of the above, v'hachokhmah, when it comes to wisdom, me'ayin timotzei, from ayin, out of nothing, out of no thing that can be defined, timotzei, is it found. Out of the level of ayin, of nothingness, which Kabbalistically is the level also of keter, the crown, from which comes the second of the 10 sfirot, which is the sfira of chokhmah, of wisdom. So Job is saying here that this wisdom has the most exalted of all sources. Ve'eze makom bino, which is the place of bino, understanding, which is the necessary complement of chokhmah. Lo yoda enosh erko, velo simotzei be'eretz hachayim. Lo yoda enosh erko, a man does not know the true value of wisdom. Velo simotzei be'eretz hachayim, it is not found in the land of the living, namely the land of the living creatures as we perceive them. You will not find it by going all around the world and interviewing everybody and looking at all the animals and deriving from them the wisdom. The wisdom is in the Torah. Tehom omar lo vihi, v'yom omar ein imodi. Tehom, the hidden depths. Omar, he said, lo vihi, she is not in me, this wisdom. V'yom omar, the sea said, ein imodi, it is not with me. Lo yutan sugor tachteho, v'lo yishokil kesef mechiro. Lo yutan sugor, there shall not be given sugor, the gold that is so precious it is hidden away. Tachteho, in place of wisdom, you cannot buy it with gold. V'lo yishokil kesef mechiro, there cannot be weighed out silver as her price. Lo sesule bechesem ofir, beshoham yokor v'sapir. Lo sesule, she cannot be praised, bechesem ofir, with the precious gold of Ophir, beshoham yokor, nor with shoham, the diamond, a precious diamond, v'sapir, the sapphire. Lo ya'archeno zohov uschuchis, usmoroso kelifoz. Zohov uschuchis, gold and crystal, lo ya'archeno, they cannot compare with her. Usmoroso kelifoz, nor is her exchange vessels of paws of finest gold. Romois v'govish lo yizocher, umeshech chochmo mitpninim. Romos v'govish are precious corals and other underwater precious stones. Lo yizocher, they are not mentioned in the face of the light of wisdom. Meshech chochma, the derivation of the source of wisdom, where it's drawn forth from, mipninim, it is more precious than pearls. Lo ya'archeno pit dat kush, bechesem tohor lo sesule. Lo ya'archeno pit das kush. The pit das kush, the emerald of Kush, of Africa, one of the stones in the breastplate of the high priest. Lo ya'archeno, cannot compare in value with her, with wisdom. But kesem tohor lo sesule, with kesem tohor, the very precious gold, she cannot be praised. It's not sufficient. Continuing now in this next parasha, coming to, after all that you cannot compare wisdom with, all that cannot compare with wisdom we've had, now we come to the allusions of the place where indeed she is, the greatness of wisdom, how God looked into the wisdom of the Torah and created the universe. Ve'achochmo me'ayin tovo, ve'ize makom bino. Ve'achochmo, wisdom, me'ayin tovo, from where shall she come? Ve'ize makom bino, which is this, the place of bino, understanding? Ve'ne'elamo me'einei chol hoi, ume'of hashomayim nistoro. Ve'ne'elamo me'einei chol hoi, she is concealed from the eyes of all the living. Ume'of hashomayim nistoro, from the bird of the heaven is she hidden. Avadon v'moves amru be'oznenu shomanu shimeo. Avadon, the place of loss, complete destruction, for moves and of death. Amru, they said, be'oznenu shomanu shimeo, with our ears have we heard her fame. Elohim hevin darko, v'hu yoda es makomo. Elohim, the God, hevin darko, with his understanding, he understood her path. V'hu, and he, the creator, the source, yoda es makomo, he knows her place. So here we have alluded to the whole process of creation through the Torah, where we find in the portion of Bereshit, the account of creation, 32 times the name Elohim, that God spoke and came into being and God saw. two times, corresponding to the 32 pathways of wisdom, of which the divine name Elohim is the source. And it is these 32 pathways are extrapolated and analyzed by Bina wisdom, understanding the paths of Bina understanding. Analyzes the path of wisdom. Behu, it is God through his supreme intelligence. Yoda, he has the da'at, the knowledge of her place. Ki hu liketsois ha'oretz yabit, sachas kol hashomayim yir'eh. For he, ki hu liketsois ha'oretz yabit, for he, the creator, the Ketzoisa Oretz, to the very ends of the earth, in all the directions of the earth, Yabit. He looks to them. It is through his creative power that he looks in all of the directions of the tree of the Sfirot. Tachas kol hashomayim yir'eh, under all of the heavens does he see. So here is Job asserting that it's not that he feels that God does not know what is happening in the lower worlds. He just cannot fathom the injustice of it, but he here affirms that God sees all. La'asos lo ruach mishkol u'mayim tikein b'mido. God's providential power, la'asos lo ruach mishkol, to make to the wind a measured balance. Umayim tikein b'mido. The waters did he establish in a measure. That is to say, each of the different countries receives the winds God desires to send them and the waters he wishes to send them in the appropriate measure. All this comes forth from his creative power through wisdom. Ba'asosoi lamoto chok v'derech lachaziz kolos. Ba'asoso lamoto chok, through his making for the rain a law and a fixed measure, v'derech lachaziz kolos, and a derech, a path, lachaziz, for the cloud of kolot, of voices, the voices of thunder. He has set down each and every thing in creation according to this wisdom, as Job now summarizes, coming now to the climax of this part of his oration. Verse 27, Oz ra'ah vayisapro hechino v'gam hakoro. Speaking now of God, looking at wisdom as he fathoms into wisdom and out of it brings forth the creation. Oz ra'ah, then he saw. The mapik hey indicates that he saw her, the wisdom that has been spoken about in the previous section. Oz ra'ah, he saw her. Vayisapra, and he counted her. Every letter, every word, every crown of the Torah was counted. Hechino, he prepared her. V'gam hakoro, and he fathomed her, he searched, investigated out to the very end. And after all of that, and here concluding like King Solomon in Mishle and in Kohelet, Vayomer la'adam, hein yir'as Adonai, hi chochmo, v'sur meiro bino. Vayomer la'adam, he, the creator of all of this wisdom, he has said to God, hein yiras Adonai, hi chochmo. Hein, indeed, yiras Adonai, the fear of God, the reverence for God. Hi chochmo, that is wisdom for you. V'sur meiro bino, turning aside from evil, that is bino, that is proper understanding. So here, ending on this note that the truest wisdom is only the fear of God, which is the foundation of all. This is the bridge into Job's evocation in the coming chapter of what he was in his prime and glory, a man of the most outstanding true righteousness. So with that, my friends, we'll conclude now this chapter of Iyov and today's study of the Mikra, of what to me is one of truly the most eloquent summits of biblical literature. Let's now turn presently to our study of the Mishnah Shabbat after a brief interval.
Heilige Shabbat, na 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 na, ya na 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 na, na 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 na, Heilige Shabbat. Heilige Shabbat.
Heilige Shabbos, Heilige Shabbos, Heilige Shabbos.
שבורו אל קייני צורם בדהס בבינו עם הסקאי כהייך בירו נו סנבוהם יש משלים בקרב חי ביי איי 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 לאו באים זילים פיקן נהיגה נו אז יגיבו בכל הוואילו סמאכן בצייסם וסמסם בויו אויסם ביי מורצאין כהינם Hey, bekhuvay, nos nimlich moy zu aboverin du. Lizak malchisoy, kuru la shaymesh va yizrachoy. Ruhu lehis kin tira sabunu. Shehei bachshei bach nos lo oy kol tvu muhoray. Hi feides yigidilu, snufim bechayos veyofanay.
Shalom, back again, my dear friends, for the second part of our studies today. And we're now turning to our studies in the Holy Mishnah, Tractate Shabbat, chapter 12. Shalom, today, the 11th day of the month of Iyar of the year 5777, corresponding to the 7th of May of the year 2017. And we continue now with our studies in Mishnah Shabbat, chapter 12, carrying on from the point we had reached. We actually, in our last session, stopped rather abruptly in the middle of Mishnah Hey, the fifth Mishnah of the chapter, and so we shall go back from the beginning of that Mishnah in order to pick up and go further. Kosav b'mashkin, if a person wrote these minimum of 2 letters on the Shabbat that would make them liable for a sin offering if done unwittingly on the Shabbat. Kosa b'mashkin, if the person wrote with some kind of beverage, meiperois, if it was some kind of fruit juice, anything that leaves a kind of stain but is not ink. Ba'avak drochim, if the person marked out letters in the dust. Ba'avak asufrim, or if they sprinkled the scribe's dust on a paper and marked out letters. Uvachol dovo she'enoi miskayim, and likewise with anything which does not endure. Potter, the person, if they did this on the Shabbat, would be exempt from the sacrifice. We should not do these things on the Shabbat, but if a person did them unwittingly and later realized they had violated the Shabbat, they would not be required to bring a sin offering. And these first here in the first part of this Mishnah, which we studied in the previous session, are examples of the kind of writing that does not endure. It is not a proper and complete writing. And likewise, the continuing examples in Mishnah Hay, the fifth Mishnah, La'achar yodoi, if the person wrote in a backhanded manner, for example, if they turned their hand upside down and they had the pen held in the wrong position, that is not a proper form of writing. Likewise, beragloi, if the person held the pen or writing implement in his foot. Bepiv, if he held it in his mouth. Uvamalpeko, if he held it in his elbow and wrote in that manner. Kosav ois achas samuch lichsov. If the person wrote a single letter adjacent to an existing written work so that the letter could be read in conjunction, which was already written, and the two letters together, the one that was previously there, together with the letter that he now writes, spells out one word. In this case, it's also a proper and complete form of writing. If the person wrote on top of some existing script that was already written on the page and he filled it in and made it more outstanding. If the person intended as one of the letters to write the 8th of the Hebrew letters of the alphabet, the letter Chet. The letter Chet is actually made up in the Torah script of 2 Zions, which stand adjacent to one another with what is called a Chatoteret, the kind of camel's hump, joining the two together. Well, now, if the person intended to write one letter, Chet, but because he did not complete the Chatoteret, the hump, he left the 2 letters there, even though we have learned that the person that writes 2 letters is already liable to a sin offering, here where it was his intention to write only one, even though the effect was to have 2 letters, in all of these cases, and now continuing with the other cases that will all prove to be patur, be exempt from a sacrifice. Echod ba'oretz ve'echod ba'koiro. If he wrote one of the letters on the floor and the other on the ceiling, kosav al shnei kosle habayis, if he wrote on 2 opposite walls of the house, where in both of these cases the letters are not intrinsically read with one another. Al shnei dapei pinkas, or if he wrote on the 2 tablets of a pinkas, of a merchant's notebook, and if the two letters in all of these cases, where one's on the floor, one's on the ceiling, one's on one wall, one's on the opposite wall, in all of these cases, potter, the person will be exempt from a sacrifice if they were on 2 different tablets, 2 pages of the pinkas, where the letters are not read together. Continuing on with the end of Mishnah Hay, the 5th Mishnah, kosav ois achas notorikon. If the person wrote one letter as a sign, that is to say, if you wrote the letter kuf with a little dot or a psik, an apostrophe by it, indicating that it's an abbreviation, notorikon, an abbreviation standing for something, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Beseiro Machayev, the Tana Rabbi Yehoshua, son of Beseiro, considers the person who did this on the Shabbat liable for the infringement of the Shabbat. V'chachomim poitrin, the other sages exempt the person. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Beseiro considers that writing one letter with a little mark, apostrophe by its side, is tantamount to writing a full word, because the person who sees that in Mishnaic times would understand if it was a kuf, it was a sacrifice, a korban. If it was a mem, it stood, the letter mem, if you put it on a box, would stand for ma'aser, the tithe, teruma, a taf. A taf would stand for teruma, the priestly gift. So the halacha is like the hachamim, that the person that wrote even an abbreviation of one letter that was understood to mean more, he would be exempt from a sacrifice for doing this if it was done on the Shabbos unwittingly. Well, now we come to a Mishnah that relates back to issues about under what circumstances is a person liable for the infringement of the malacha. We had in the previous chapter, the chapter of the person throwing 4 cubits in the public domain, that if the object left his hand as he throws it on the Shabbat and he does not realize it's Shabbat, and if he remembers while the object is in mid-air, that person is not held liable to a sin offering, because the moment he remembers it's the Shabbat, that's already turns into a flagrant act. Even though he can't stop the object that he's thrown, that is a blatant act. Well, now, in the case of writing, we have seen that the minimal measure for being held liable for the labor of writing on the Shabbat is to write 2 letters. So what happens if the person wrote one letter on Saturday morning, and he didn't realize it was Shabbat? He wrote one letter, and then later on Saturday afternoon, he wrote a second letter, and in between, each time he wrote the letters, he was not aware that it was Shabbat, but in between, he did realize it was Shabbat. The person wrote 2 letters on the Shabbat, b'shtei halomos, in 2 separate concealments. That is, achas shahris v'achas ben harba'im. One of those concealments, when it was concealed from him that today is the Shabbat, one was in the morning. V'achas ben harba'im, the second came about in the afternoon. He again forgot it was Shabbat. When he wrote the second letter, in the meantime, he had known that it was Shabbat. Do these 2 letters join together, because they were both written in a state of concealment from him of its being Shabbat? Do they both combine to make up the minimum of 2 letters that must be written to render the person liable? Or, since the 2 acts were separated by a moment of lucidity when he knew it was the Shabbat, does that mean that each of the times when he forgot it was Shabbat and wrote one letter, it's only a half a labor, and because of the break in between when he knew again it was Shabbat, and only afterwards did he write when he forgot a second time it was Shabbat, so they're not connected? Rabban Gamliel Mechayev. If the person did this in 2 separate acts of concealment, morning and afternoon, Rabban Gamliel considers that even though each letter was only a half measure, they join together, and that the break between the 2 acts, when the person did realize it was Shabbat, does not separate them from joining together into a complete measure of 2 letters, rendering the person liable to the sin offering. V'chachomim poitrin, the other rabbis exempt the person from this, from the sacrifice, because they consider that the moment of lucidity between the two moments of concealment separates them into two separate events, and neither of them was a complete malacha. They do not join together, and therefore the person is exempt from any sin offering. With that, we conclude the chapter 12, and we now come to chapter 13 of Mishnah Shabbat, entering now into the second half of this tractate of 24 chapters. And now in the earlier part of this chapter, we will be dealing with the labors that are involved in weaving and sewing of threads in connection with the making of fabrics. So we now enter the intricate world of Mishnaic weaving and fabric production. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, ha'oireg shloisha chutin batachilo. If a person weaves 3 threads at the outset of the weaving process, ve'echod al ha'orig, or if he so much as wove 1 row on fabric that was already part woven chayov, such a person will be liable for a sin offering. Rabbi Eliezer is telling us his view of the minimal measure of the labor of weaving on the Shabbat, just like we are with all of the different labors, learning what is the minimal measure. Of course, if a person wove a whole fabric, they would be liable to a sin offering if they did that unwittingly on the Shabbat. How much would they have to weave already to be liable? Says Rabbi Eliezer, they'd have to weave 3 threads of the weft going through the warp threads in order to be liable, if that was the beginning of the weaving process. If he just passed the shuttle through 3 times through the warp long threads, he would be liable for sin offering. Has violated the labor of weaving. This is the minimal measure. And if there was already on the cloth beam of the loom fabric already woven, if he so much as passed the shuttle through 1 time through the warp threads, he passed the weft 1 time through, that already counts as the act of weaving. That is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. But opposed to him, v'chachomim omrim, other sages say, and this is the accepted view now in the halakha, bein batachilo or bein basoif, whether it's at the beginning of the weaving process or whether it was at the end when there was already woven fabric on the beam of the loom, shiuro shnei chutin. The measure of weaving is already always 2 threads. And there we have simply stated the measure of weaving. We now come to the intricacies of Mishnaic weaving, and ha'oisa shtei botei nirin banirin. Here the person is preparing, setting up his loom for the weaving process. Well, the loom is made of the 2 beams at one end and the other of the loom. There is the beam that is called the warp beam, on which the threads of the longitudinal warp threads are wound. And before the threads ever get to what is called the cloth beam, where the woven fabric is, they have to pass through 2 frames that are called the heddle, and alternate threads of the warp yarn are passed through different, what are called batei nirin, the houses of the furrow. They're passed through so that during the weaving process, after all of the threads have been set up along the whole loom for the fabric that is being woven, so each alternate threads will pass either through the first heddle or the second heddle. And when the first heddle is raised and the second heddle is lowered, the act of weaving is by passing the shuttle through so that the shuttle passes over the threads that are in the lowered second heddle and under the threads that are in the raised other heddle. And then the weaver alternates this. He lowers the first heddle, raises the second heddle, and again passes the weft thread through on the shuttle between the alternately laced threads, and that is what creates the crisscross effect of weaving. So in preparing the loom, it is not enough to set up the chassis, the warp yarn on the warp yarn beam, but all the threads of the chassis warp have to be passed through the successive batei nirin, the houses of the furrows, which are going to be used in the weaving process. And so our Mishnah therefore tells us, ha'oise shtei batei nirin banirin. Somebody who makes two of these batei nirin, he sets up two of the containers for the thread. Sometimes apparently these are called harnesses. Somebody who sets up just two of these banirin in the furrows that are created by this process. So this would be the minimum amount to set up for the loom to be liable to this particular labor of Shabbat, which is not the same as the labor we just discussed in the first Mishnah of the weaving of the weft through the warp. That was the machloket, the division of opinion between Rabbi Eliezer and the other sages. Here we are talking about a separate labor, which is to do with setting up the warp threads with which to weave, and not only weaving fabric, but also weaving baskets and anything that is put together by having the threads pass through in a crisscross, whether it is basket weaving or any other kind of a construction like the Mishnah is going to be speaking about, where a person, for example, makes some kind of fabric out of reeds or willows, a loose, rough mat, or whether it is an actual basket making. In all of these cases, the upright or longitudinal cords are called the chassis. The chassis is the warp, and the weft, which is the threads that pass between alternate threads of the warp. The weft in Hebrew is called the arev, which means they are mixed in because they are passing through alternately between one and the other of the warp threads. So any such preparation, our Mishnah is speaking about all the different examples of things one might use some kind of mesh or network. If one sets up just two of the warp threads, then the person is liable for this violation of this labor of setting up the batei nirin, setting up the warp threads. So to follow through now our Mishnah, ha'oisa shtei batei nirin banirin. If the person sets up two of the warp threads, banirin, whether it is in the heddles of the loom, bakerois, whether it is in a mat made of reeds woven together, but nofo, be it in the mesh of a sieve. Nofo is a sieve used for sieving flour. Be it in the network of a kavara, which would be a sieve used for separating the kernels of legumes from the waste, uvasal, whether it was in a basket. In all of these cases, the person, if they did this on the Shabbat unwittingly, would be liable for a sacrifice. And continuing now with the second Mishnah, v'hatoifer shtei sefiros, somebody who sews 2 stitches. V'hakorea almanos litfor shtei tefiros. And likewise, somebody who tears the fabric because he needs to stitch 2 stitches. Here we are dealing with the minimal amount of stitches to be liable for having transgressed the labor of tefirah, of stitching. And the labor of tefirah, we've just heard, if it's enough to sew 2 stitches to be liable for the labor, the needle going in and out, passing the needle in under the fabric, up on top, passing over the fabric, passing underneath again, and having it immobilized at the other end. That is already the labor of stitching. Now, the complementary labor, just like writing has the complementary labor of erasing, and like building has the complementary labor of destruction, of demolition, the negative labors are only considered to be labors if their purpose is constructive. In the case of sewing, sometimes the seamstress has to tear the fabric in order to make a better bind when the seamstress will come to sew the fabric together. So here the tearing serves a constructive purpose. So if the person sewing were to just tear sufficient to make 2 stitches, they would be already liable. Well, with that, we come to the third Mishnah. We had just heard that in order to be liable for a sacrifice, the person would have to do something destructive that served some constructive purpose. And our Mishnah tells us that if the person tore something out of rage or as a sign of mourning or in any other manner that is purely destructive, the person would not be liable to a sacrifice. But where the person destroys something, like erasing writing or undoing stitches in order to fix something later on, the measure is the same as the original measure of the constructive act. Let us follow through this Mishnah now. Hakorea b'chamosoi. If a person were to tear fabric out of rage, and he's doing this not for any constructive purpose, v'almeisoi, or if the person performs the act of kri'ah, of tearing over the dead, it is a custom of Israel in mourning to tear a garment on the loss of one of the close relatives. So in either of these cases, if the person did this on the Shabbat, be it out of mourning or out of rage, v'kol amakalkalin, and likewise all of those who may destroy something, peturim, they are exempt from any sacrifice. V'yamakalkil al menos l'sakein, but where a person destroys something, as in the case of erasing script or in the case of undoing stitches, amanas l'takin, if it's their purpose in order to write other script or to sew together now the 2 pieces in an improved way, shi'uro, the measure, kimasaken, the measure that was undone or erased would have to be the same as the measure of the original labor. If the person was erasing letters in order to write, just like the minimal measure of writing is 2 letters, so the minimal measure of erasing to make the person liable for a sacrifice would be erasing 2 letters. If the person was undoing stitches, if they undid 2 stitches, they would be liable just as they would be if they stitched 2 stitches. So now, the halacha is not quite like our Mishnah. First of all, hakorea al mesoi, where a person is tearing a tear as a sign of mourning. Commentators tell us that if the person made this tear over one of the relatives he is not required by the halacha to make a tear for, one of the more distant relatives, if he did that on the Shabbat, that is when he would be exempt, because no constructive purpose was served by his tear. But in fact, if he made the kriya, the tear, for one of the relatives he's obliged to make a tear, like mother or father, or brother, or son, and so on, if it's one of the close relatives, then in fact he has made a repair through this act on the Shabbat, and therefore he would be liable for a sacrifice if this was done on the Shabbat. That would be performing a tikkun. And likewise, the Talmud says that this Mishnah, as formulated here in our tractate, was actually rejected by the later sages when they purified the Mishnahs. And they rejected this Mishnah for entry into halacha, because when a person does tear something out of rage, they are actually making a repair because they are satisfying their evil inclination. And therefore, if they were to do this on Shabbat, they would not be liable, they would not be considered exempt for a sin offering. They would be actually considered to be, even though they're purely destroying, since they have made a repair by satisfying their impulse to show their rage, then that is considered, that makes them liable to the sin offering. And with that, we conclude this third Mishnah of Tractate Shabbat, of chapter 13. So with that, my friends, we conclude our studies for today. Regrettably, I'm unable today to offer a Shavua Tov hookup, and I do hope, with the help of God, to be able to offer a Shavua Tov hookup this coming Sunday, Lag BaOmer, one day from today. In the meantime, I do look forward to being with you tomorrow for our studies Monday. As I announced earlier, there will be no studies in our Avram's Tent Kollel on either Tuesday or Wednesday of this week. We have studies today, tomorrow, Monday, and on Thursday of this week. And with that, my dear friends, I wish you Shavua Tov from Jerusalem. Shavua Tov, Morach, a good and a blessed week. Have Pesach Sheni, a second Pesach on Wednesday that will be nutritious to the soul and fill us with joy, that even if sometimes we don't do what we should do, God gives us a second chance with the help of God to succeed. Shalom from Yerushalayim.